Coming up, I'm going to be talking about how there's not going to be any more of the Acolyte. But before we go any further, make sure you do hit that subscribe button to keep up with the latest Disney Plus news. Hi, it's Roger here from What's On at DisneyPlus.com. It's time for a quick Disney Plus news roundup. So let's start off with talking about Star Wars The Acolyte. So this brand new series debuted on Disney Plus back in June, ran for 8 episodes. And it was a bit of a weird series. It was set kind of like 100 plus years before the events of The Phantom Menace. It was kind of a unique single story set with the Jedi, and they were kind of trying to track down a murderer. Now, there was a lot of issues with this particular series. Now, just on my personal point alone, I thought it was a bit all over the place. There were some really good episodes, like I think definitely like the 4th episode. There were some amazing fight scenes, and the story itself, I kind of like some of it, but there's whole aspects of this show which just felt a little bit weird. Kind of retelling the same story from a different point of view. Was like, why? Doing all these flashbacks multiple times from 3 different angles just was a bit flat. I just didn't get why we had to be shown the same thing from 3 different angles, because it wasn't really a big enough point of view, and it was a very messy show. Because it was a messy show, it really did not perform as well as a Star Wars series should. While it debuted at sort of the #1 slot in terms of on Disney Plus this year, in terms of the biggest premiere, not hard to do when Disney hardly released anything on Disney Plus this year. It's kind of like, it's the biggest release. There's only been 2 big releases, so yeah, bound to be. Nevertheless, that's my little thing on that one. So the viewership for the first episode was pretty good, as you'd expect with people checking it out. But the viewership absolutely tumbled to the point where it wasn't even on the Nielsen streaming chart, pretty much I think from like episode 3 right through until the finale, when it popped up on the like number 10. So that showed that nobody was watching it in the United States. And because of that, the show has been cancelled and is not going to be returning for a 2nd season. Now, the terminology of whether or not they hadn't planned on there officially being a 2nd season, even though the creator had said that they had plans for multiple seasons, but they were only kind of going with the one. And with the way they kind of got left, it got left with a cliffhanger to the fact that there could be more episodes. On one hand, I kind of hoped that the story would maybe get wrapped up, and if they were committed to it, that they would give 2 more seasons and try and fix it. However, apparently, according to Deadline, it is done. It is not going to be returning. And I'm kind of sitting here like, yeah, you could see why. The viewership was awful for it, for the expense that this show cost. And that's the key thing here. The amount of money they spent on it, and it did not deliver the results. Now, there is something that we definitely have to talk about with The Acolyte, and there's no point kind of skirting around it. This show was like Marmite. People loved it or people hated it, and I think there was a lot more people that hated it, and there was a lot of hate online. There was just hatred for this show, to the point, a lot of it was even before it even got released. Now, a lot of this stuff was down to the fact of whether or not it was considered woke and it was too progressive. There was elements of the show where you were like, why? I questioned, like, why did you do that? You didn't need to do it, because it didn't actually do anything with the story. And then in general, there was just this, as the show went on, more and people just fell off because they weren't enjoying it, and it just wasn't as good as it should be. Star Wars has always been really high quality, and this was just not that. And so yeah, it has been cancelled. It's not going to be returning. Now, whether or not the characters pop up in another series, I mean, that might be one way they can kind of save it and tell the story, because it's not The Acolyte, so maybe that might work, but I don't think Disney's going to want to invest money in a project that the audience just did not want. I wouldn't be surprised if they kind of finished the story through like a novel or some comic books, or maybe even an animated series, something along those lines. But I think definitely a book or a comic book series to wrap that up is probably what they'll do, just to kind of keep diehard fans happy. But there is little doubt, though. I mean, online today, there was a lot of people taking victory laps about how bad it was, and this will send a message to Lucasfilm that they've got to do better, and, you know, the go woke, go broke, and all this kind of thing. And there is an element of this thing of the negative reaction, and what happened with this show has shown that they went a little bit too far with the messaging. There's no point in denying it. Bob Iger said in the past that they need to pull back on the messaging and focus on the story. And some of these projects like The Acolyte were done before that, and I definitely think you know, they need to just pull it back a little bit. We're seeing Lucasfilm refocusing back on theatrical releases with The Mandalorian and Grogu, and then with some other movies. But they have got to be looking at the results of what's happened with this show and with other things that they have created over the last like 5-10 years, and realize there's a pattern. And you know, and alienating original and sort of fans is not a good way of doing this. You've got to try and, you know, you want to get new people in. You've got to be, you know, it's got to be seen to be for everybody. And I think this is where Star Wars it's just gone all over the place. I do actually feel like at this point where, you know, we've got Skeleton Crew and we've got Andor, and we know, I think we've got Ahsoka season 2 coming. Maybe it is a thing of one show a year is enough. They've did too many and the quality reduced. The Acolyte, I was full of hope that it was going to be a lot better than it was, but it just didn't click on that level. There was no excitement about it, and I think that's the problem with these shows, is they just don't have that feeling to them the same way that a movie does. And also I think movies and stuff have to be a lot tighter. They have to be, you know, a lot more, they just generally have to be in a much better position. The Acolyte, to me, it was not a surprise that it was not renewed. I definitely thought when they didn't announce it at D23, that was it. So I'm glad that we've got kind of confirmation that it's over with. I wouldn't expect, like with other cancellations where these shows get whipped off the streaming service, I don't think they'll do that with this one because it's too big a franchise. But yeah, this is just a big failure all the way around for Lucasfilm, for Disney Plus, and just really highlights how they have got to do better. They just can't keep chucking stuff out there and hoping that we're all just going to tune in. If it's not good enough, we will not watch. In Star Wars, the level is much higher than if this was a non, you know, just a sci-fi show that, you know, it was generic. I think they've got to really just look at what they're doing. You know, there's a lot of calls today about the fact, you know, Catherine Kennedy should be gone and all the rest of it. And, you know, there is that kind of thing of like, look, we've had a lot of bungles over the last few years with the Rise of Skywalker, and now we've had this, we had the Book of Boba Fett. We're at a point where it's like, look, Star Wars needs a direction. It needs some focus and to be concentrate. I think moving around all the different eras and just filling in the gaps between all the movies, it needs a story to move forward, some kind of focus. And, you know, if they want to focus on the Mandalorian era, do that. That's what. But jumping around all these different places, I think, is confusing. And I think they have just got to make better shows. This is just not good enough. And there's no point in sugarcoating it. I know there's a lot of people that liked it. And I watched all 8 episodes, and there were episodes that I liked. But overall, I would, you know, when you look at it all, it was probably, you know, 3.5 out of 5 for me. It didn't hit properly. It had some good moments. I think the first episode and the 4th episode were really good, but it just didn't click. And the audience didn't turn up, and that is why it's there. It's not just about the online campaign, because that's obviously will have had an impact, and there's no point in sugarcoating the fact that that will have had an impact on how many people were checking it out, and the hatred for the show will have had an impact on ratings. But the simple truth is, audiences tuned in and didn't bother tuning back in, and that says to me that the audience just did not like what they saw and didn't return. And there's no way you even really just sugarcoat the fact of marketing and all the rest of it can only get people in the door. It doesn't work going forward. And unfortunately, I think The Acolyte is one of those shows where they just pushed it to the point where, you know, it needs to be simpler. It needs to be for everybody. And I think that's the key thing, rather than just pushing forward on, you know, trying to push boundaries and stuff. This is Star Wars. This is about people running around with lightsabers and with good versus evil. That is the story. Don't need to overcomplicate it. And I think, you know, with this show, they tried doing some stuff which just didn't work. The audience just wasn't interested, and hence why we're not going to see any more of it. Whether or not we ever see these characters again, I don't know. I mean, you know, they do tend to like going back and filling in the stuff, but it definitely shows to me that what the Acolyte was a colossal failure. The trouble is how is this going to impact? Is this going to impact on Skeleton Crew? I do think Andor will probably be all right, because the reactions generally from adult fans, they liked the first season, and we know that with the second season, that is it wrapping up. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I definitely feel like this is going to be a big dent, and they need to do some serious meetings at Lucasfilm to work out what they can learn from this show. Look at not just this show. I think they actually have to look at all the shows, all the movies that they've released over the last like 10 plus years since Disney brought Star Wars, and go back to basics. If you need to give the franchise a little bit of a break, maybe that's just what they do. You know, get Mandalorian and Grogu out and give it 2 years. No, don't have to feed us 3-4 series a year, movies and animated shows. Maybe giving Star Wars a bit of a break might be the best thing. Unfortunately, Disney Plus kind of got launched with the idea of Marvel and Star Wars were the two core cornerstones, and they ran them into the ground trying to do that, and now we're at a point where neither of them are working for Disney Plus. And to be honest, it feels like the only way they can fix Disney Plus is with that big green Hulu monster to kind of fill the void. But let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comments below. Go check us out over at whatsondisneyplus.com, and I shall see you guys soon. Laters.